In the last video, we were looking at different systems to classify mental health and mental illness. Specifically, we looked at categorical approaches and dimensional approaches. We then looked at the DSM as one of the examples of a categorical approach. The other categorical approach that we'll be looking at is the ICD-10. ICD-10 stands for the International Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, shortened to ICD. Currently, the ICD is in its 10th revision and it consists of 21 chapters covering mental and physical conditions and disorders. One of the key things that distinguishes the DSM from the ICD is that the ICD actually distinguishes between mental and behavioural disorders, which the DSM does not. Similarly to the DSM though, there are different axes which contribute to the diagnosis and categorization of mental disorders. The ICD has 3 axes. These are 1, clinical diagnosis, 2, disabilities, and 3, contextual factors. You can find an elaboration about, on each of these in box 12.6 on page 493 of your books, but we'll also be going through them in a little bit more detail in class for you to consolidate your understanding around them. The other type of system of classification is dimensional approaches. So dimensional approaches focuses on spectrums or continuums, and you should remember what a continuum is based on our states of consciousness unit back in Unit 3. So dimensional approaches assumes that there is a continuum of mental health, so mentally healthy through to mental disorder, and that every single person is somewhere along that continuum. What it then does is it quantifies, so it puts a person's symptoms or other characteristics of interest into numerical values, numbers, and it puts them onto one or more different scales. So this system of classification focuses on grading a person in terms of how severe they are on each dimension, rather than whether that mental disorder is there or if it's not. An example of a dimensional approach comes from when we're looking at personalities. So the EPQR is a type of personality dimension, and it looks at where does a person fit along these different dimensions, along emotionally unstable, which is also known as neurotic, down to emotionally stable, and where they fit along introverted and extroverted. So dimensions such as the EPQR has an inventory of lots of different characteristics, which helps to put a numerical value on where a person is along that continuum. It also emphasizes this idea of transition, so that people can move along the continuum throughout life, and even within different settings. So it really takes away from that category, which can then build stigma. So if a person is diagnosed with something using the categorical approaches, the stigma of having that diagnosis is with them, potentially for life. Whereas with the dimensional approach, there is a much bigger emphasis on the fact that people can transition and move along the continuums within different parts of their life. I'm just going to quickly also run through some of the activities that we'll be doing in class, just in case you miss any of the classwork and want to catch up in your own time. So in class, you will be doing that activity that I talked about regarding the DSM axes. So you'll be matching examples of mental disorders into which category you think it fits best. So having a go at diagnosing as if you were a psychologist in this case. We'll also be summarising and elaborating upon those 5 different axes that we talked about, and comparing and contrasting the ICD and DSM, which are both 2 categorical approaches, but are slightly distinguished in how they categorise mental disorders. We'll also be looking at the strengths and limitations of the categorical and dimensional approaches, and then start looking at the biopsychosocial model, which is a bit of revision from what we've done before. But the reason we're doing this is because the next part of this course will be looking at how can we apply the biopsychosocial model to anxiety disorders, specifically stress. So please take a look at those different questions if you don't get time to do it in class, but we will be debriefing all of that in class, and make sure you write down any questions that you have for me as well.